Hello, everyone, and welcome to another GamePad online interview. My name is Nigel, mayamada co-founder and organizer of the GamePad events. And hopefully you've seen some of our other interviews. If not, this is a series that I've been doing where we talk to industry professionals, people who work in games, to find out how they got there, some of the work they do, and any advice for people who aspire to similar positions. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing right now. And with me is Dan Bernardo, who is the founder and game director at Playtra Games. Dan, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to speak to you, and also like the T-shirt. Have you played?
Thank you very much.
Have you played Metroid?
It's one of my three favorites.
Okay, I'm gonna take that bait. What's the other two?
I think I have one that I draw that is a kind of fan art of Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
And I have a third one that is another Metroid one, but was signed by one of the people who worked in the game. So it's kind of like very close to my heart. Okay. So I have to brag. That one, the third one is a straight bragging.
Just create casual name drop on the game there. Cool. All right. So we're going to get into some of that, maybe talk more T-shirts a bit later. And as everyone is watching, let us know your thoughts in the live stream. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can drop us a comment. You can also join our Discord where you can continue the conversation, particularly for anyone who is interested in getting into the video games industry and want some pointers or of where to go, where to find out more information. Like, talk to us, we're here. You can also reach us on social media. We are at mayamada on Twitter, at mayamada TV on Instagram and TikTok, and I promise at some point there will be something on our TikTok, because right now it's pretty barren, but we're working on that. So we're here to speak with Dan. So Dan is a games geek and design nerd. Those are his words. He founded Playtra Games and started advocating for alternative narrative structures and cultural diversity in games. So a big voice in the games industry, giving talks on the subject and also at events around the world, including PAX and DevCon, where he currently sits as part of their advisory board. So I'm going to take a guess that you have a lot to say, which is good for an interview. So we'll get into that. Actually, one of the first things I wanted to know is, because you're from Brazil, and so I've briefly been to Brazil quite a while ago. I wonder, have you been to the Christ the Redeemer statue?
The Cristo, the big one. Oh yeah, I've been there. I have a kind of Resident Evil story about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, very briefly. I went there with my my boyfriend at the time, and we managed to get the last. Because I don't know if did you get the train that goes up like.
Oh no, we walked. I'll tell you that. Okay. Yeah, we walked up.
There's a little train that goes to the and I remember coming down there. It was raining. It was dark, and I was just expecting one of those Resident Evil monsters just like burst inside the carriage. But yeah, I've been there a few times. Okay. Did you like it?
Yeah. We'll talk about more Brazil later. I always wonder because it's like. Sometimes when you're from a place, you don't always explore the places. So when someone comes from outside the country, they go to all the tourist places. So
the thing is that I come from the north of Brazil, and Rio is quite south, and Brazil is huge. So
yeah,
it's even for me to go to Rio and go to those places, it's a trip. Yeah, it's a trip. Yeah, it's a big trip.
Yeah. So I mean, tell us about that. Like, you're sort of born in Brazil. You said you're sort of games geek. So what was it like growing up in Brazil, and particularly for someone who's into games? Like, what was your relationship with video games growing up?
Yeah, that is for me always been very formative. I grew up, as I said, in a slum in Brazil, like in a very deprived area. Come from a very very poor family, very big family, 8 of us, the youngest. And
you're the youngest.
I am the youngest. Okay. And I was growing up, we didn't have the luxury of having video games. I was trying to put in the table one day after the next, and then I I think the first memory of video games for me was coming from school and just looking at other kids' windows and seeing they playing their Ataris or Master System. Yeah, I'm that old. And I remember just like fascinated by the technology by the art of it. Coming back home and then drawing the games in paper. So video games is always something that it always first attracted my curiosity as an art form and as technology before actually making me a gamer. So I was always very curious from the very beginning of the technical and artistical, parts of what makes a video game a video game.
Okay. And because your background is like working in the tech industry. So you kind of went from having an interest in games on the, like you said, the technical art side, but then you went into the tech industry and then came into games. So at what point, I'm interested to know how you got into the tech industry, but also at what point you decided, actually, I want to work in video games.
That is, for me, my path to video games was a very, curvy one, because growing up, I was trying to get any opportunity to do anything that, could get me in the places I wanted to go and people want to meet and, the career I wanted. So I didn't have many options in the beginning. It was not like, oh, I now going to set working video games. I was like, I'm set to get out of here and try to get education, and I'm set to have a house and, be able to pay my bills. So that was my first priority. But I was very lucky that I had lots of interests growing up. Like, video games and technology was one, but anthropology and history, philosophy, science. So I was very happy if any one of those things like dropped in my plate. And I ended up going and getting my degree in anthropology first, because it was the first back in Brazil. Doing uni now is much easier, but back in the days was very complicated, expensive like anywhere. But the best universities are the public ones, where just rich people and get prepared enough to get into. And being able to get one of the seats in one of the places in the university was okay. That is my crowding achievement in life, and just getting to do anthropology was already incredible. If I could choose, I would go to games first. But getting a higher education was already a dream come true. From there, I always been, as I said, quite interested in many different things, and design was one of them. And design is one of the things that when you go to university is great, but you can still develop some skills by yourself.
Yeah.
And what
you have that space to like experiment with other things, right?
Yeah. And then one thing like to another, anthropology to design for tech, and then tech. And then it's like creating my career in technology.
Ah, okay. And because you worked in tech and like at high positions, so were you starting companies? Were you working at sort of bigger companies? Like, how did you find that progression in the tech industry before you went to games?
I think it's always difficult talking about this particularly, because when you come from a background, black mixed with background, or being a queer person, or any one of these backgrounds, there's a bit more complicated because of the biases that you receive up front. The first big bias that you have to overcome is the one about yourself, what you think about yourself, what you think that you can achieve because you've been told that you cannot your whole life. So I started doing work as junior, but I just decided that I was enough. I could do whatever people sent to me in my direction, and it's exactly what I did. I tried to get all opportunities that I could get, being ethical and being respectful, but never saying no to a challenge, and trying to justify my presence in companies every time, because like, what is this black guy doing here?
Did you feel that? Like, you said facing that up front, did you feel that, like, was it a conscious thing being told it, or was it just something that you felt internally?
It happens more than once where I've been directly told. It happened more than once that just for how people react to you is difficult, but you have to, get the best out of it. I remember one day going to give a talk and sitting with other people in the panel, and then somebody comes and the presenter comes and says, "Where's this dumb Bernardo? He's late." And then he looked at me and said, "Can you get me some glass of water, please?" He just could not conceive that this guy coming from, a C-level tech guy would look like me.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's those things that I just go up, got the water, brought back to him, say, "Here we go," and just wait for him to realize who I was and what I was doing there. Was pretty embarrassed for him. It was pretty fun for me.
Very polite way to approach that situation.
Yeah, I think, you can do whatever you want. I think if you get very annoyed or very outraged by those things, is your right. I don't think it's very productive. I try to go to the most productive, avenue that I have access to.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it and make something of every situation that you're in, really. So, like, speaking of sort of representation and being sort of a black gay man, so that's a lot of isms that you're facing in there. But so, what does a lack of representation mean for you, especially as someone who's now in a position of creating media?
I find interesting because we are when you talk about representation, we are in a very interesting moment where the industry is embracing representation, but the aesthetics of representation, not the philosophy of representation, if it makes sense.
Okay.
So everybody wants to put a gay character in, the design of it is very appealing. They want black characters, they want gay characters, they want female characters, but they don't want to create a philosophy of understanding how these characters work and why the stories about them is different from the stories about somebody else. So I think it's always the first step when you start being interested in the design and aesthetics of something. But I think we have to start, moving to something a bit deeper. What makes the experience of a black kid in, the countryside of America or of UK differs from in the rumble types that we always had. Why their stories is different, how they react differently, how the cultural background changes the decisions. That's something that that's the more interested in, instead of only how aesthetically they look.
Yeah,
which is great to begin with, but I think we are ready to go a bit further.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction to make as well. You have the sort of surface level, the aesthetics of in a certain way, I guess, done in the worst ways, like almost like a box ticking thing. Like we did that, it's there, see, look. And then what you're saying is like a bit deeper level, looking at what makes this character, who comes from a different perspective, different and make different decisions. And that's more work, basically. that's more work to...
I don't know if you do this, but sometimes I get some very, very controversial topic, and I see what Twitter is talking about it, and it's funny because Twitter I'm sorry, Twitter lovers out there, but it's super toxic right now. But you see what the community in Twitter is talking, and then you go to Black Twitter, and you see the responses are very different.
Yeah.
The way we feel about those things is different, and you go to queer Twitter, and it's quite different as well. So I don't like to see those characters responding the way I would, and I feel kind of almost spoiled, because before, just seeing somebody who looked like me in a video game would be enough, is because I had none. But now I feel like it's possible to do
more,
to do a bit more.
Yeah, I get that, and I think for me, because as a brand, like, we make manga. So I write stories. Our characters are animals, so it's a different kind of thing. But I always feel with stories, like the power of story is to see from another person's perspective and gain understanding, because I mean, there's no story about me. So every story I consume is another person's perspective. So it's that need just on, there's always for me at least, a moral cause for like more diversity, but just on a story level of enjoying stories, like get different stories, different perspectives. Not to say every perspective is for everyone, but you can broaden the horizons. So I totally get that about the digging deep into the perspective and giving someone a different view on life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, I think in a previous interview, you mentioned sort of making media that makes people feel something. I think along a similar lines of having that empathy and how that impacts on the person that's consuming. So again, as someone who is making a game, how does that impact the way you develop a game, like making something that makes people feel something?
That is the magic of video games, right? That is the one thing that you can tell a story without preaching, or without there's a lot of games who preach. The preach is okay, but that's the ability of creating a story that goes straight to your heart or straight to your emotions. And I think we are living in an age where people don't want to listen. We are in our own bubbles, left, right, middle, whatever it is, and we just accept whatever resonates with what we think. And I don't want to put this all in the people who don't understand, don't listen what I say. I probably do exactly the same. But when you can go to games, you can feel the experience that people are having, and then you can create this very powerful thing that's called empathy. Understanding people's suffering, understanding people's. You don't need to agree. It's not about agreeing. It's about understanding. It's about feeling. So if I can create a character in a story where people are gonna see a type of person that they probably don't sympathize with, but they can at least understand the struggle, can understand what they are going through. Yeah, you might find that this person is gonna come up with their own way of connecting with those audiences. So the games that we do at Playtra, we have a few guidelines, and one of them is never preach, always show. Always show the struggle, always show the happiness, the joy of doing things, the horrors and difficulties of doing things. Don't try to say what's right, what's wrong, and just show different people having different reactions. And I think we are empathy machines. We might not be using this these days very much,
yes.
but we've been programmed to be empathetic with each other. We just have to try to find a way to use the machinery that we already have.
Yeah, maybe relearn some things. But I like that though, the showing, and I think because there's a thing in storytelling like show don't tell, and similar thing is because I feel that a story, like any story, whatever medium, should say something, but not necessarily preach. So it's about, if you have a particular view, it's more exploring that view. So maybe looking, even yourself as a creator, looking at other positions. So if something happens, you might have a character that maybe represents your view, but then there's another character that represents, the opposite view, or, just to the side of your view, and seeing how that goes. I feel that makes for a better, a more interesting story.
There is a funny story about this. That it sometimes backfired for the company. We are creating this game, and the main character, her name is Donna, and I remember one feedback that we got from a publisher was, "Oh, I don't like this girl. I don't like her decisions. I don't like her emotional, reaction to things." And I was kind of happy and sad at the same time. It's yes, you don't have to like her. You just have to follow her story. And I know that sympathizing with the hero or heroine is quite important. But what we want to do is, why, when somebody talk about her hair, is such a big thing, because, for Black women, it's a bit more there's more cultural background and baggage than for you probably is. So you probably don't understand. Well, maybe if you play the game, you're going to understand why, in the end, this is important to her. So for us, it's more important to create real characters than necessarily always relatable characters.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And like for me, a recent example of that is The Last of Us Part 2, where there were things the main character, other characters were doing that like I didn't agree with, I didn't want to do, but I understood like as part of the journey, that story is going through and understanding sort of their perspective. Even there were a couple of times I just put the controller down. I was like, I'm not doing this right now. Have you played it?
Yes, okay. I played it. I'm very concerned about The Last of Us because the team will have like 8 people.
Yeah.
And because we are in the depth of development, we don't have a lot of time of playing video games. So The Last of Us is in the list of like 4 of the team, and I cannot comment anything for like a year and a half now because like no spoilers.
Yeah, you can't do that. Don't ruin that. But actually, you know what? Before we get back to the live stream, I do want to ask a pretty obvious question. I should have maybe asked at the top. Is like, what do you do? What does a game director do? So I know you're the founder of Playtra. I think we all kind of, by and large, understand someone who's founding a company. But a game director, what is your role as a game director?
So as a game director, it's my role to create the vision of the game and what kind of game we're creating, what kind of stories we're creating, what kind of experiences we want people to have, and be able to pass this clearly to the team, create a unified vision. Because it's a very small team, it means that I cannot just sit and talk about the vision. I have to actually put my hands and actually do things. So on top of being the game director, I'm also game writer. I'm also level designer, UI designer. So I do quite a lot of different things in the team. But this is something common for any small studio. So if you want to get into games in a small studio, you have to be aware that it's very rare for you to sit and do one thing. It's important for you to be able and willing to do different things. Because a game director is my main role is to make sure that the product has a vision, and whatever is the vision is clear to everybody, and they're all working towards the same goal, and we can deliver towards it.
Yeah. Okay. And like, if there's someone watching who is looking to get into the industry, maybe as someone like a game director, what would be your advice for them? What would you say to them?
I have to be very honest that this is still a very new experience for me. I'm still learning a lot. This Grid Force of game that we are creating right now is our first big game, so I'm making quite a lot of mistakes. I'm quite aware of it.
Yeah.
So there are a few things that I know that come from my previous lives as executive in other companies that help me and helps me a lot right now. One is try to learn a bit of everything. You don't have to be able to do every single work, but you have to understand the different roles and different areas of a game development. You have to understand what is easy, what is hard, or at least be able to communicate this to your team. You have to have an absolute open mind about having spent the time your ideas are the best idea, and be able to be humble enough to incorporate other people's ideas, be generous enough to acknowledge that the ideas don't come from you, don't steal other people's ideas, and be willing to change, be willing to learn. So I don't think, for me, coming to the industry as a game director is very rare. You normally start in more junior roles, and trust me, I tried. But I think if I had to start when I was a bit younger, I would probably just get a small studio and try to learn a bit of absolutely everything. And I think having this kind of wide view of the process is quite important. Finally, I think you just acknowledge the games as art as technology, so you never know where you're going to end up. Sometimes I have a great idea for a game in paper that just doesn't translate. And
I can imagine. Yeah, no, it's good advice. So we're going to talk a bit more about Dan's experience, about some things around the industry, maybe about Brazil as well. Probably talk more about Brazil. But for now, we're going to go back to the live stream, and we're going to have an extended version of my conversation with Dan on YouTube later after the event. So for now, we'll see you all later, and stay tuned for the next interview. So you talked about the game you're working on, and tell us a bit more. So you mentioned, like, in terms of the philosophy around making characters. So your game Grid Force, what is it about? What stage of development is it at?
So Grid Force is a work of love that is divided into different parts. One is a narrative part, another one's the gameplay. In terms of gameplay, Grid Force works quite similar to Mega Man Battle Network series, and more recently games like One Step from Eden. So it's an action grid base. So you have one side your team, and the other side the enemies. They don't move between the grids, and they attack each other in each grid. So it's a very simple game mechanic, but what we try to do is to create quite a lot of strategy to it. So because it can be quite chaotic, because the grids are small and the characters are very colorful and big, we affectionately called the genre of the game tactical bullet hell. So it's a bullet hell game, but with a lot of tactics in it. Basically, what you have is you create your group of 4 characters out of 30 that you can find around the world, and then you can change between them on the go and then fight the enemies the other side real time. So it's a very fast-paced, very colorful, very fluid game. This started, as I said, we love Mega Man Battle Network, so it's like, how about we create something like that? And then the game, as always, the game evolved. Yeah. It evolved in something much faster than we expected, but we just love it. That is great, but the bad part of it is very hard to explain to people what it is. Is not a game that is not following a trend. Is trying to create its own thing, which we're very happy about. But at the same time, yeah, it's hard to sell to people what it is without people actually playing it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you get, because people, to a certain extent, people want what they already know, and if it doesn't fit into what they already know, and it's like, I'm not sure what this is.
You are right, but there's another part of it is that people don't know what they know until they know.
Yeah. That actually made sense. Yes.
So I really hope people want what we are doing.
Yeah.
But this is the first part. This is the gaming part of the mechanics part of the game. The other part is a love letter that myself and my team are doing to extensive, big JRPGs. So the game has a huge story full of decisions that you make that actually change the game quite radically. And this, when I say radically, is absolutely absurd. So each one of the 9 worlds have, each one of the scripts have more than 150 pages. So the story is very, although you can go through the game very quickly, there's so many variants of the story that you can experience. And we also wanted to create something that is a love letter to the big heroines of our lives. So the mothers and sisters and girlfriends. And we decided to do this by creating a world where that's all female characters. So all characters are female.
Okay. Wait, so all playable characters, or all characters in the game?
Including the monsters, they are all female.
Okay.
And this create in a way challenge slash opportunity, because when we start creating the game, we have just boys in the team. So it was a great opportunity for us to bring female writers and female artists and female concept artists to create a very, authentic story. We want the story to be relatable around female players, but also interesting for male players and, people that are in the spectrum. So yeah, the story follows Donna, and she goes around this world trying to solve the problem. This killing all the goddesses of the world, and then enlisting more than 30 people to her team. And then depending on who you put in your squad, the gameplay changes quite a lot.
Right.
In a nutshell.
Cool.
In terms of development, we are in the very end now. It's the second year of development, and we are hoping to launch by the end of this quarter, beginning of the next quarter. So it's quite close to launch. We have the game. There's a demo on Steam. The name is Grid Force, Mask of the Goddess.
Okay.
And the game's also going to be for all consoles. We will all be launched at the same time.
Cool. Yeah, we can put a link to that in the YouTube description so people can check that out. And so this quarter or next quarter, and you said it's on record now. So
yeah, I'm saying this. I can see my teammate just like breaking that door and just like killing me.
And if I got this right, as part of the game development, you worked with the non-profit It Gets Better project. Is that for this game?
Yes. So
yeah. So how did that come about, and how did it shape development?
That is, again, my first game needs to be something very personal, and I don't think, as Playtra grows, I don't feel like we're gonna have the same freedom that we have right now. So we don't have publishers or investors saying to us what we have to do. We would love to, but now we don't. Which means that we can tell the story we want to tell in the first game. And as I said in the beginning, my background and my upbringing was quite complicated when I was young. Being a queer kid in Brazil of the 80s was not easy. It was very complicated and dangerous. Sometimes just for the fact of being queer, your life would be at risk. And I remember being a teenager trying to understand about, what I feel and who I love and who I am allowed to love. I wish there was somebody who come to me and say, hey, things going to get better. Right now things stink, but things are going to get, as you're going to grow, you're going to find new people, you're going to find your family outside the family and acceptance and all those things. And I saw many people from my generation, losing their lives or taking their own lives because they had no perspective. And my mom was this person for me, mostly. She was the one saying, hey, things are going to be fine. You're going to grow out of this situation. And when we start creating the game, I already quite a big fan of It Gets Better, because that's exactly what they do.
Right.
They go around and they pass the message that things are going to get better, bringing people very successful that being and felt the same way that these people are feeling right now. These teenagers and young adults are feeling. So I really want to do something about it. I really want to contribute. And the first part was to create a story that is about this. So Donna goes through this, and this is her journey from non-acceptance to acceptance. But also want to do something, financial to support them. So we created an event called In Gamers Make It Better, and we got lots of queer streamers to come and stream different games. No, it was nothing to do with our game. We didn't want to show our game in this event. We want to other queer developers to be able to show their own games. So we approach queer developers, we approach queer streamers, and we brought them together, and we asked the communities to donate whatever they wanted. And 100% of the donations will go to It Gets Better. And our target was something around $4,000, and we end up with almost $17,000 in the end of the event, which made me really, really happy.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good, and that's a good. Yes,
good and we're going to continue doing this. Yeah, we're going to continue to do this for each game that Playtra creates. We're going to be working with a different charity.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good aspect to add to the game, and particularly that for young people, because whatever the issue, the difficulty faced with young people, I find you can at that age you think that's all it will ever be, and so I can imagine that. And so, like, saying you're working with different charities for future game projects as well, so that there's an element of a like social message in your games, I guess. And is that a difficult thing to do? Because I feel that's something that's quite new, at least with like awareness of games being some kind of force for sort of social change or messages. Is that something that you found difficult to do? I imagine it's something you feel is necessary. Is that something you found difficult to implement?
That is such a great question, because there is a stigma about games with a cause. They are educational, and education is boring. I don't want to play a game that has a message. I don't want to play a game that makes me want to think.
Yeah.
That's the reason why.
Challenge. Why already think?
Oh yeah.
Is the other thing.
No, it's an absolute nightmare to be able to pass this to people. So from the very beginning, the reason for Playtra to exist is not just to make a statement or anything like that. It's to create games that entertain people. So games have all these great, amazing properties, but the first one is to be entertained. People need to have fun. So our games initially, it starts with a good idea and with a good, nice mechanic, and people need to love this. And everything that comes in terms of mission and representation are things that are going to enrich the game, not take out of it.
Right.
So what we want to do is to create a game where people play and have fun and laugh and cry and get mad because the boss is too hard. But in the end of the day, they can say, oh, I like what Koniko went through, and I like what Donna went through, or I understand why this character betrayed everybody and killed and burned the village. Like this is something that we really want to happen, but we don't want this to, just like, hey kids, let's learn. That's not the thing. I want to create the games I want to play, and I don't think I wanted to play educational games when I was young.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, it is a tough balance, but I think that's the thing. You have to make it, engaging, entertaining first, and then you can explore the other ideas. But it is a tough balance. And so, like you say, you're sort of nearing the end of development for this game. Is there something you've learned along the way that perhaps you didn't know before that you'll carry forward to future, whether it's about sort of development or maybe working within the team you have?
You know the thing about the Mount Stupid? That you go, and then you're in the top of the Mount Stupid, and then you start learning, and you're just like, oh, I know absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think I'm.
So I'm climbing Mount Stupid.
Okay.
So I just can see where I am right now. The guy that started developing this game 2 years ago, how absolutely naive and full of hubris and full of pride he was, and how a fool he is, because I never did anything that hard in my life, and I did quite a lot of hard things in my life. Game development is a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's worth it. It's great. It's amazing, but it's a nightmare. There's so much hidden work. There's so much that can go wrong. There's so much that goes wrong. there's so much hate that you get online, especially when your game is labeled, a game with a message.
Yeah.
Which very quickly becomes a game with agenda.
Yes, that is very true. Yeah.
So I learned in the very beginning. I used to say to the team, people say, "Oh, people are not talking about our game in the very beginning," and I was like, "Don't worry, it's better than people talking, about the game." And then people start talking great things about the game, and then the haters appear, and then I was like, "Yep, that's exactly what you wanted. That's what you get." So learning to just keep your head, your eyes on the prize, and keep working and keep learning, and having fun with your team is probably the main thing that I've learned. And the second one is that I learned is that I know absolutely nothing. I honestly know nothing.
That's a good lesson to learn, honestly. It's a good lesson.
But it's good because we are in the journey together. I love, one thing I love to do with the team is I get a piece of work that they did in the very beginning of the project and then compare with something that they did last week.
Yeah.
And there's like, especially when they come to me, it's like, oh, I feel that I'm not growing. It's like, I'm going to show you. And then I can show these two things. And it's like, oh my God. Yeah. The first thing that comes to them is like, oh, this thing is rubbish, what they did initially.
Yeah.
Is the first thing. And then I was like, yeah, because now you can see a progression. So we still don't know nothing, but we know a bit more than when we started.
Yeah, that's a good practice to do, actually. And just to echo that, know nothing, because I think for anyone starting, the quicker you can get to that point, because if you know everything, or if you think you know everything, it's harder to learn, and you have to learn. Like, there's so much to learn. But if you come with like, I have more to learn, you'll be better for it, I feel. So I definitely agree with that. And the last couple of questions is, we mentioned Brazil. Definitely want to go back to Brazil. If not, because when I went to Rio, where else in Brazil should I visit in this massive country?
I don't understand why people go to Rio and don't go to São Paulo. It's so close and there's so much to do there.
I think Rio has better branding and like marketing. So that's just the place to go.
So when I finished uni, I went to São Paulo, and it's very close. It's like 30 minutes flight, and it's very close for Brazilian standards. It's like the neighbor city.
Okay.
And São Paulo is bigger than New York and is more multicultural than New York. There's quite a lot of things, incredible things to do. There's a huge, amazing gaming development community in whole Brazil, but in São Paulo, they are absolutely bonkers. Go to the north. There's quite a lot of amazing beaches over there. Great place to go. Amazing food. I think everybody can say exactly the same thing about their countries.
True. Yeah.
But I think the great thing about Brazil is that you can fly the whole, can fly 7 straight hours and still in the same country and still have the same very warm culture. People keep talking about, the challenges that we have as a culture and the violence and all those things. And they're all true. I'm sorry to say they're all true, but there's just hidden beauty that you can find in every corner of Brazil that I honestly miss. Being a British citizen now, I love this country. Not complaining. I'm not your average British who just gonna say how rubbish the weather is.
The weather's terrible. Whatever. Yeah.
But I can appreciate the Brazil was my home country. It's quite special. Cool. So go to Rio, to São Paulo. Rio is great. I have good friends there. I'm not Rio. But São Paulo is quite underrated.
Okay, noted. We'll make a note of that. So my last question is, what does the word gamer mean to you?
If I can translate, I would say dreamer is somebody who is open to experience different things. Is someone who enjoys challenge and growth. It's someone who's very hard to, that knows what they want. and fight for it. I think gamer is a very underrated word. It comes with a lot of like more than 4 decades of baggage. But gamer is what rules the world right now. They're the gamers. So we are here to serve them, I would say.
Cool. I like it. No, thank you. And yeah, thank you for joining me for this interview, Dan. It's been good to hear your perspective on video games.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate travel advice on Brazil. Make a note of that as well. So hopefully people watching enjoyed that too. If you did, give us your feedback. Drop something in the comments. You can jump in our Discord or send an email, like an old-fashioned email, feedback@mayamada.com. And also, make sure you follow us. I got to do the whole follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitch. So when we do future live events. And if you have not tired of my voice yet, we also have a podcast, Story X Story, where myself and my co-host Tazzy talk about stories across pop culture. So video games, anime, manga, comics, TV shows, films, and everything. So check that. I'll put all the links in the description. And this has been another GamePad online interview. Stick around because we'll be doing more of these. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey there, I'm Nigel from mayamada. Thanks for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other great videos we have on the channel. You can also join the GamePad Discord and check out the next event at gamepad.events. We'll see you soon.